ومن بينها دولة الإمارات على تحقيق الحياد الكربوني.
استخدام التقنيات الحديثة والصناعية هي جزء رئيس في عملية تقنين التغيير المناخي وخفض درجات الحرارة. على سبيل المثال الذكاء الاصطناعي يستخدم في تطوير مواد مختلفة لم تكن موجودة سابقا. الهدف من تطوير هذه المواد هو حبس غاز ثاني أكسيد الكربون أو تحويله إلى مواد أخرى.
يوجد لدى دولة الإمارات خطة واضحة وطموحة للوصول إلى الحياد الكربوني من خلال تسخير التكنولوجيا والاعتماد على الانتقال من الطاقة التقليدية إلى الطاقة المتجددة والانتقال إلى اقتصاد أخضر مبني على الاعتماد على الطبيعة في مواجهة تحديات التغير المناخي.
الأمم المتحدة في اجتماعها الأخير في مؤتمر المياه الذي يقيم في شهر مارس أكدت أن إذا أوجدنا حل للمياه فإننا نستطيع أن نساعد البشرية ونساعد الكوكب على التخفيف من تأثيرات التغيير المناخي. لذلك قمنا بتطوير جهاز نضعه على المسطحات المائية. طريقة عمل الجهاز كالتالي: الماء المتبخر من الأسطح المائية هذه يطلع داخل الجهاز ويتم حبسه إلى فترات المساء، وعند المساء عندما تنخفض درجات الحرارة يتكثف البخار داخل الجهاز وننتج ماء نقي من دون أملاح، من دون حاجة للكهرباء أو من دون الإضرار بالبيئة.
أشجار القرم تلعب دور رئيسي في مواجهة التغير المناخي، فالقرم له القدرة على امتصاص 4 أضعاف الكربون مقارنة بغابات الأمازون. تم تأسيس برامج لزراعة أشجار القرم في إمارة أبوظبي. جميع هذه الجهود والمبادرات التي تقوم بها الجهات المحلية والخاصة تصب نحو الهدف الرئيسي والذي أعلنته دولة الإمارات نحو زراعة 100 مليون شتلة من أشجار القرم بحلول عام 2030. تم اختيار التكنولوجيا لزراعة أشجار القرم باستخدام الطائرات بدون طيار من قبل المنتدى الاقتصادي العالمي ليكون ضمن أفضل 12 ابتكار حول العالم يوفر حلولاً لمواجهة التحديات التي تواجه المحيطات.
نحن متفائلون أن البشرية ستوجد حلول للتغيير المناخي، لأن هناك أفراد في هذه العائلة الكبيرة همهم الأول والأخير حماية الإنسان، حماية البيئة، وحماية المستقبل للأجيال القادمة.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الفريق سمو الشيخ سيف بن زايد آل نهيان، نائب رئيس مجلس الوزراء وزير الداخلية، سمو الشيوخ، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، الضيوف الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. اسمحوا لي بداية بالتعريف عن نفسي. الدكتورة في محمد الحرش، رئيس قسم تطوير الأعمال في إدارة الهيدروجين الأخضر في شركة أبو ظبي لطاقة المستقبل مصدر. يسعدني اليوم أن أرحب بكم، ويشرفني أن أتولى إدارة هذا الحوار. وأود أن ألفت عنايتكم الكريمة إلى أن المحاضرة ستكون باللغة الإنجليزية، وبإمكانكم استخدام السماعات للاستماع إلى الترجمة الفورية. والآن اسمحوا لي بالتحدث باللغة الإنجليزية. Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am deeply honored and excited to be moderating today's session, which addresses a critical and crucial topic at a critical juncture in our planet's history. Every day, there is fresh evidence of the hurdles that humanity faces when trying to address sustainability and climate challenges. At the same time, we also hear about technological advances that could provide us with solutions that changes the way we live forever. Today's lecture, titled Advancing Technologies for a Climate-Resilient Future, will no doubt explore some of these fascinating and important themes. It will be delivered by an exceptional professional who is an eminent thought leader in the world of climate resilience and sustainability. Dr. Sharon McPherson is the co-founder and director at the Center for Disruptive Technologies and the co-founder and CEO of Green Jobs Machine, an AI-enabled climate resilience analytics platform. Dr. McPherson is also the co-founder and former CEO of Africa's largest women's infrastructure investment group. And on a personal note, I'd like to add that it was a great pleasure hosting Dr. McPherson at Masdar yesterday. As the UAE's clean energy powerhouse, we were delighted to share details about our experience in advancing the global commercialization and implementation of renewable energy and clean technologies. And now, without further ado, I kindly ask everyone to please join me in welcoming Dr. McPherson to deliver her remarks.
Thank you. I'm going to come down. I've flown from Washington, D.C. Here to speak to you today, not really just to deliver a lecture, but before I go any further, I just also wanted to say thank you, Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, for having me here today. And as we like to say in South Africa, which is my adopted country, all protocol observed. So thank you. I flew here today under the auspices of talking about advancing technologies for a climate-resilient future, but I really have a prayer in my heart today. So I'm coming to share with you my lived experiences, but my prayer, and I feel very comfortable saying that in this environment, because I sincerely believe that there are questions that we're grappling with that go beyond advancing technologies. And so what I really have in my heart as my prayer today is that you remain open in terms of your own hearts and your heads to the questions of who you are as Emirati, why you're here today, and more importantly, what are your plans, both personally as well as professionally, in terms of how you're positioned to lead, not just in this incredible part of the world, but globally. There are over, I think, at least 197, but surely at least 197 countries that you've invited into your home, and they're looking to you for leadership. And so I think that this is one of the most important times, not just in the history of COP. We'll talk about why I think this COP28 is perhaps one of the most important in history, in the history of COP. But this, I believe, is one of the most pivotal times in the history of humankind. But I think that this is one of the most important times in the history of humankind. And so, so everything that I'm going to talk about here today is really about the how, and the why, but the who is really the questions that I'd like for you to be thinking about on a personal level. How do you take this knowledge that I'm sharing from my own lived experience, and how do you make that your own? I am not the Oracle of Delphi. I'm not coming from up high on Mount Olympus to come and spew knowledge down. I'm talking to some of the most sophisticated and technologically savvy people on planet Earth. That's you. And so I invite you to just take a journey with me through some of my lived experiences that I'm here to share with you. But I really believe that the world is poised to hear from the Emirati. And I encourage you to engage with open hearts and minds so that we can prepare ourselves, I believe, to lead into a new dispensation in terms of how do we dig deeper into measuring the things that matter. I don't believe that everything that matters can be measured, but I do believe that with advancing technologies, we can begin to measure better the things that we do need to measure. So that's in part what I'm going to be talking about today. And I know that the human brain works on story. So one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to start by telling you a little bit about my own story in terms of how I came to be here with you today. So my background is in banking and law. I am a reformed investment banker. I did not break the global financial system all by myself, I promise you. Leonardo DiCaprio was there too. I know you saw the movie. But I spent a lot of time doing things that were not sustainable when I worked on Wall Street. And I was an advisor for both Shell and Chevron, and I have a background in doing really complex transactions between big entities like Shell, like Chevron, like ADNOC, and governments. But what was missing from my work was community, was the people that get impacted by the deals that we make, right? And so that's some of the metrics that I'm talking about. Because if we don't get those metrics right, then the example that we can take from the lived experience that I had on the Niger Delta is going to proliferate. And so what did I learn from working with both Shell and Chevron on the Niger Delta? I learned that you can do good and you can do well, but you have to approach the conversation with empathy and compassion. And I think too often today, I'm invited to talk about advancing technologies, but I'm not asked enough to talk about hearts, to talk about vision, to talk about values, to talk about the things that should be shaping policies, the things that shape practices, the things that translate into frameworks and data and metrics. Technology can't do that for us. And so I want to make it clear, I am not here to sell you on the idea of technology alone. I'm here to sell you on the idea that if we don't bring our hearts into the conversations with our hands and our heads, we are finished. Technology alone is not the answer. And so what did I do on the Niger Delta? I helped to structure a transaction that cut across about 5 different countries, the Western Gas Pipeline deal. And it was such a bad deal for the people who were downstream, for example, like the Ghanaians, that if there was a disruption in Nigeria and the lights went off in Accra, there was no recourse. Because the Western Gas Authority was controlled by who? You know. You know. Shell and Chevron. Exactly. Right? Judge, jury, arbiter. Right? And so what began to happen? What began to happen is people who made their lives from fishing or from agriculture, you know, you'd have an oil spill and there was no recourse. And so when that happened over and over and over again, and no one's listening because the National Petroleum Company is doing something, and then the governor of the Delta State is doing something different, and then Shell is saying, well, I put the money in, but that the money went on walkabout, and it never got to the people who really needed it, what happened? You know. What began to happen is that people began to arm themselves, and they began to blow up pipelines. That's what happened. And then there was almost a civil war. You know, and then some folks came and they intervened and, you know, and they won a Nobel Prize for Peace. And still today on the Niger Delta, too many people are devastated. Their livelihoods are devastated. They can't feed their families. They can't take care of their people. And that's, if we're smart and we think we are, then we should be able to do better than that, right? We should be able to do good and do well. So what I learned from the Niger Delta is how to not get shot at, okay? Because I was shot at. And so I began to think, okay, hang on for a second. I've left Wall Street. I'm now living in South Africa. I teach project finance at the University of Cape Town. I'm advising. And so then I actually went onto the other side of the table and I began to work with communities, bringing together the knowledge of how do you structure complex transactions, how do you build public-private partnerships between business and government, but how do you bring in the community element? Because the communities are also complex. Who's leading the community? How do you begin to interact with the right community leaders so that the resources that the UAE has spent billions. You've committed billions. You partner with people all over the world, all over the global south. You have, as part of your strategic plans, the idea that you really don't want to leave anyone behind. But how do you make that happen? How do you make that a reality? That's really what this conversation is all about. And so I began to focus on resilience. One of the things I realized, I was invited back to Washington, D.C., probably in 2019 to begin to work on what was a Jobs Creation Act. It's now called the Inflation Reduction Act. But I was asked to look at the intersectionality between climate change and infrastructure and national security. And it was there that I began to realize that resilience wasn't just this thing that I thought was incredibly important because it could make a difference in terms of the lives of those fishermen on the Niger Delta. But I realized that I was spending time with the generals at the Department of Defense, and if you look at their climate strategy in terms of the U.S. Department of Defense, resilience is all over it. And then I went to the Department of Transportation, and then resilience was all over their strategy as well. And then I went to DOE, et cetera, et cetera. And then I looked at the UN's language around adoption, and it's not adoption, adaptation and resilience, it's adaptation and resilience. But then it goes on about adaptation and no one's ever talking about resilience. And so I began to ask people, amazingly smart and accomplished people, how do you define resilience? Why is it that resilience is something that people talk about a lot, Dr. Faye? But I couldn't find anyone who really had a working definition. And listen, there's no silver bullet. I do realize that there are lots of incredible academics, and I'm in all kinds of conversations all the time, because people say even this definition that you're going to share with me right now is not the best definition. So I don't think that there are any silver bullets. But I believe that you've got a policy that says we're going to take a pragmatic approach. Right? We're going to take a pragmatic approach to how we really tackle climate change. And so that pragmatic approach, I think, is anchored really in resilience. So I don't think that there's anything that we could be talking about right now that is more important than this. So I'm going to get to the definition of resilience and why that matters, but I believe that this concept of resilience, which is this thing that's been around for a long time, is even incorporated into U.S. military training. We need it more now than ever. So I decided I was going to be the resilience lady. So you can call me the resilience lady. So resilience is critical to building a sustainable future. We've got more carbon in our atmosphere now, today, than, according to climate scientists, than we have had in over 125 million years. Yo, as we say in South Africa, yo, 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 right? 125 million years, that's a long time. And we have had temperatures of record, temperatures exceeding historical records. And of course, the Earth's climate has always, been changing. But something else is going on here. So we've got temperatures that have exceeded, since we've been counting, but certainly based again on climate scientists, some of the highest in 125 1,000 years. Wow. So how do we build a sustainable future, and how can we leverage our hands, our hearts, the most powerful machine on the planet, which is still the one between our two ears, along with advancing technologies, and I'll tell you what I mean when I say advancing technologies, to really build this sustainable future. And so this idea of leaving no one behind is part of your strategy, inclusive growth. So one of the things that we were able to witness, for example, during COVID-19, is we were able to witness the UAE in action. You did an incredible job of making sure that the Emirati were safe and that you were taken care of. And one of the things that I've been doing since I've been here is I walk around and I love spending time with young people, right? And so I ask young people, I ask young Emirati, what do you like best about being an Emirati? What are you proud of most? And do you know what they say? They say they're leaders. They say that what they are proud of most is the fact that they feel like their leaders hear them, and that you take care of them, and that they hear you. There's not a lot of countries where young people feel that way about their leaders. So, congratulations. And so we know that you do a good job leading. The question is are you ready to lead the world? Because you've invited the world. So do we have the open hearts and minds that are going to enable us to do for the world what we know we can do for the UAE? I'm a messenger. I came here with a prayer in my heart and a message for you. So that, for me, I think is one of the most exciting and important reflections that we can take away from this time today. The best strategies are always going to be human ingenuity with strategy, thinking about what we really want from this, with technology as an enabler. And then COP. So for the first time in the history of COP, we have the CEO of a business heading COP. That's never happened before. And I think that that's important. And I wanted to come to speak to you today, but I also wanted to come to show support. I'm a member of the JEDI group for gender smart investing. I'm one of the, I guess, considered thought leaders behind things like the 2X initiative. You know, I've been involved with the climate action movement from a community perspective for a long, long time. And there are a lot of people who are concerned about COP28. This is high stakes. This is a high stakes situation, right? It is. And so I wanted to come and show support because I believe in the pragmatic approach. I believe that Dr. Sultan should be head of COP. I think that we've had incredible people from all over the world who have come up with, we've got 17 SDGs, we've got, 169 targets, we've got 262 indicators, but one of the things that's missing is metrics. We're measuring performance, but how does that translate to the fishermen on the ground in the Delta State actually being better off? And so I don't believe that we've necessarily gotten it wrong in terms of the framework. I just think we've got to be a lot more pragmatic and a lot more serious about the metrics, and that's where the advancing technologies come in. And so I'm all for it. I believe that we've got the right ideas. I think that this is one of the most important COPs in the history of COP. We've got a CEO of business who's president. We've got the stock taking that is going to take place. We've got the loss and damages on the table. And this is happening here. So, game on. So I promised you that I would define resilience. And this is how we define resilience. The ability to respond to prepare for, to adapt to, and to thrive in adverse climate conditions. So some folks have said to me that I'm okay with that definition, but when you added thrive, you kind of lost me, right? Because resilience as a thing has been around for a while, but I think now we need it more than ever, so I've made it my business to be the resilience lady. And I put thrive into the definition, and what we're doing is we're using some of the most advanced technology literally on planet Earth and in space to begin to measure resilience. That's what we're doing. And then we're going to save lives and livelihoods. Why thrive? Because if I showed you the picture of that tree, but it was dying, would you think that that tree is resilient? Probably not, right? So this concept of thriving, why is it okay for people at the base of the pyramid to just be getting by? Why is that okay? Why is it that we think that we are so smart and we're the apex predators on planet Earth and we've got the most powerful machine on the planet between our two ears, and we can't fix our systems such that the people at the base of the pyramid can thrive? When we've got enough resources on this planet for every single man, woman, and child to be a millionaire, that is absolutely ridiculous. So, resilience matters. And I believe that as we're thinking about metrics for resilience, we should absolutely incorporate the idea that I am thriving in adverse conditions, not just that I'm getting by. There are people in Kentucky, for example, who have had 7 devastating storms in the last 8 months. How do you thrive in that environment? You're still cleaning up from the last storm when another storm comes along. I think one of the biggest things that we've got to think about is how do you shift capital at scale to fund resilience? Because if we don't fund our capacity to prepare for adverse conditions, then you never get to adaptation, you never get to mitigation. So I want you to think of resilience as a bridge, right? And so one of the challenges to funding resilience and indeed sustainability in general, and of course we don't have metrics around sustainability, at least enough metrics in my opinion. So I'm going to talk about resilience because I'm figuring out how to measure that. But you've got industry on one side of the equation. You've got government, which is responsible for building the roads and the enabling environment. Implicit in this conversation that I've structured for you today is a biasness of my own. And that biasness is in favor of business leading. And I'm going to put that right out there on the table. I spent a lot of time with climate activists, and I am down with that program. But I believe that business should lead. Follow and not lead here because of some of the own complexities, and we can talk about it offline, but there's a lot going on. And so you've got industry over here, you've got community over here, you've got businesses that are complex, that are trying to manage. I mean, you think about the complexity in an organization like ADNOC, or like the biggest renewable energy company in the world, which is Masdar, right? It's big. There's a lot going on. And so if you take that complexity, and then you take the complexity, go back to a place like Nigeria, it's complex. In the Delta state, you've got the big tribes who are very powerful. You've got the little tribes who don't have a lot of political power, but they've got all the oil. So you've got all this complexity between the communities. So who's the leader over here? And so these guys are like, listen, I've got a business to run. I've got stakeholders, which too often don't include the community because you're thinking about shareholders, or you're thinking about the board, or you're thinking about the other people that you need to serve. But too often, you're not thinking about these guys. And so the S in ESG is a little bit wonky. And so what have businesses done? They focused on complying because that is easy. Easier, certainly, than dealing with this complexity. And so there is a tremendous amount of capital, financial capital and other kinds of capital, including creative capital, that is locked in industry. And that's my bias. I am all about how do we build bridges. Clearly, government is here, but this is a conversation that is focused on industry as a use case, understanding that government is also an important partner. So how do you build bridges between industry and community? How do you unlock the capital? This is the investor's dilemma, right? The investor's dilemma is that in the systems that we've constructed, capital likes to flow where capital is already flowing, right? People do business with people that they know and trust. And then capital as a thing kind of doesn't like flowing uphill and, you know, it's complicated. I need to understand the risk. That's the dilemma. I've got my business to run. And so as a result of it, this whole idea of ESG, reporting, compliance, it's burdensome. For too many businesses, it's a grudge purchase. It's like buying tires for your car. It's like, what? Do I need to do this again already? I just bought tires. You don't want to buy tires. Who wants to buy tires? That's what it feels like. And so by anchoring the requisite amount of attention on resilience as a thing, we're able to build bridges between industry and community. And so we were able to go to Texas, you know, where you know, there had been this big freeze and farmers, they lost their cattle and they lost their crops. And some people in this room probably lost a little bit of money too, because it was a problem. The grid was down. Climate impacts infrastructure. We know that. And so by anchoring the conversation on resilience as opposed to ESG and green jobs and some of the other things we care about, we're able to go in, talk to people like Dan Crenshaw, who's one of the politicians that represents Texas, and you know, we're able to go in to talk to people who normally would not be receptive to the conversation. But if you're having conversations and the conversation is about being stronger in an adverse environment, would you like that? Absolutely. Would you like some investment that's going to help you to prepare better for the next big freeze? Because we know that it's going to keep happening. Even if we reached net zero today, right now, not 2050, if we reached net zero today, based on some of my friends who are the best climate scientists, I believe, on planet Earth, we would still be experiencing adverse climate events for the foreseeable future. So that means that even if we reach net zero today, resilience is still a thing. And by focusing on resilience and then figuring out how do you measure it and how do you drive it in some of the most vulnerable communities on the planet, but leading with business resilience, because every business also wants to be resilient, and then linking it to community with the bridge, everybody wins. And so sometimes I think the most profound solutions are not the most advanced technology on the planet. It comes from human ingenuity with a sound strategy with technology as an enabler. So these are some of the technologies that we're using presently to drill down into understanding resilience. So one of the most important technologies that I think that we should be focusing on is space technology. I'm really going to pick up the pace. I'm going to stop because I want to hear from you as well, and I'd love to have more conversations offline. So space technology, I think, is one of the most important technologies, whether we're talking about low Earth orbit unmanned vehicles, right up to sensors that we can put on satellites. I think increasingly we're going to be going up to space, and with breakthrough technologies that allow us to increase the resolution, decrease the latency, we're going to be able to increasingly look at things on the planet and get data from a number of different modalities. And with expert data scientists and people who can provide insights, we're going to be able to, whether it's concerns about what's happening in the fishing industry, to how climate is impacting infrastructure, to how to get information to people in a timely fashion who are responding to a disaster. We're going to increasingly be going to space to figure out what's happening on planet Earth, all right? I can go through different kinds of technologies, but what I want to do is I'm going to end here, and then I'm going to fast forward to my last slide, and then I'm going to hear from you. This is how we're measuring resilience. Of course, environmental and ecological factors, critical infrastructure is important. So I know you've heard from other speakers who have talked about libraries and toolkits. We've come down from libraries of hundreds of factors through toolkits right down to like the metrics which are here. Because that's where you need to be if you want to measure the things that really count. So you've spent $100 billion. How many jobs did you create? What's the quality of those jobs? Right, how many people are better off? How are you measuring whether they're better off? And so I think the UAE is positioned to lead, to say every investment that we make, we need to have a resilience score on it. That's what I think it would be really interesting. But in any event, vulnerability of population, economic factors, scaling infrastructure. We're not the first people to come up with a resilience index, but I think scaling infrastructure and vulnerability of the population are two major breakthroughs. Most indices don't measure those things. And so if you want to really understand resilience, you need to understand, is this person in Kentucky and they've had 7 storms already? That makes them a little bit more vulnerable, right? So if you're investing, understanding these factors, and then going down to the sub-factors, and then using technology to measure is what it's all about. Some examples from insurance, how insurance is using space technology. Some examples in terms of how you in the UAE have used behavior tech in terms of your food, energy, and water nexus. I think we should be using behavior tech, Dr. Faye, to figure out how we get the various players in COP28 together. Some insights into what really matters. This is it. Technology alone won't ensure our ability to be resilient. It can't be done without empathy. Head, hands, and your heart. That's it. Thank you.
I do apologize if I rushed you towards the end.
It's okay.
But Dr. McPherson, thank you very much for sharing your insights on what I would say is an important and a global challenge. Because the thing about global challenges is that they can only be addressed via collaboration in this case, bringing together people from various backgrounds in order to really drive action.
I think that's right.
Now, if you'd allow, I'd like to ask a few questions.
Okay.
So you mentioned earlier COP28.
Yes.
It's exactly that, and the UAE will be hosting COP28 later this year. So in your opinion, what would you like to see being achieved by COP28 that would help facilitate and expedite the implementation of climate resilience in this case?
Well, I said it. And so I said I came here with a prayer. And it's my prayer is that we use this opportunity to drive the idea of pragmatism. I won't apologize for my belief that business needs to lead. All right? I won't, because I've tried it other ways and it doesn't work. when I go into a very complex organization and I say, okay, we're going to measure your resilience. We're going to rank, we're going to score you according to indicators that you understand, and we're going to help you to, be stronger and impact your bottom line in a way that you can measure. Would you like some of that? Absolutely. Oh, and by the way, here's a framework that you can use to understand how your resilience is connected to your operating environment, because clearly your community and the communities in which you operate matter to your business, right? They go, oh, yeah, right. So I don't think that it's really about changing anything that we're doing with COP. I think it's about evolving our understanding, and I think this is the COP to do it. So if you look at what's happening right now, you think adaptation and resilience, and you think loss and damage. You think mitigation, and you think transition net zero. Where is resilience in that conversation?
Good question.
Good question. And so if there's something that could come out of this COP, I think, is drilling down to say we've got lots of indicators, but what about the metrics that matter to business? What about the metrics that are going to change the conversation from, oh, wow, I really don't want to be involved with this. I've got a business to run, and all of a sudden you're really interested because we've made it clear how what's happening in your community absolutely has a direct impact on your bottom line. That means also that you can report this better, right? If you link this kind of framework to your reporting requirements, you got a winning combination. I want it to be easier for businesses to do the right thing because it's also the smart thing. That's what I want. That would be, I think, one of the most incredible breakthroughs, and I think it could have a knock-on effect in terms of metrics around loss and damage, as well as other things we measure like CO2 and methane, et cetera. Yeah.
Very well said.
Okay.
Now, we often hear about the threats that could be posed by AI in this case, but I'm very curious to know what your opinion on the topic is and whether or not it could be used to actually allow communities to become more climate resilient in this case.
Thank you. AI, most of these technologies have been around for a long time. The concept of resilience has been around for a long time, and people have argued, what does it mean? Is it relevant? And we're digging down into it now because we need it. AI is the same way. I mean, people won Nobel Prizes for AI back in like the 70s, right? So AI has been around. So why is AI suddenly this thing that's in sort of the global consciousness that's causing people angst? Generative AI, of course, but also the exponential growth. I mean, why advancing technologies? Advancing technologies because the quantum and the pace of growth is exponential. And so, so what do I think about AI? I think that without AI and data, resilience doesn't work, right? You can't measure it. So you need the data, right? This isn't this is a, let's get the thumb, it's not a thumb-sucking exercise. This is a quantitative analysis process. You need qualitative analysis tools and you need quantitative analysis tools. So this is a quantitative analysis tool, and how can it be used for community? So I think AI, like any technology, is a tool. If you put corrupt and evil people in charge, then it will do corrupt and evil things because of the consciousness of the people developing and using the tools. So my biggest concern isn't about the future of AI. My biggest concern is about the consciousness that is prevailing on the planet and the breakdowns. I mean, every other week in the United States, we have a mass shooting. We've got a serious problem. And so my concern is the breakdown and the lack of bridges between people. Head, hands, but where's the heart? We've lost the courage to have conversations about the things that really matter. It's all about the technology. Can AI be utilized to really make a difference in the lives of vulnerable communities? Absolutely. And please, don't buy the story that with respect to these communities that we are completely awash in data. It's a lie. Those communities are marginalized because we haven't been investing in them. And now it's ironic that if those communities in the Congo and those communities in Brazil fail, well, we're all going to suffer. And so now we've got to go back, and we've actually got to gather hyper-local, community-centric data about people and climate and phenomena in places that we've ignored. And so AI is absolutely critical, because without AI, no matter how smart we are, we just can't crunch the kind of data that we need to crunch so that we can extrapolate insights and then go out and do something better someplace else, because we've learned over here. Now we're going to go over here. But without an AI-enabled platform that's able to crunch trillions of data points, then what happened in Texas, the guys in Louisiana they're not even learning from those mistakes and things that actually work.
That's a shame.
It is a shame, and we're going to do something about it. You and me, Dr. Faye.
We will. We will.
Yes.
To be honest, there was one topic that I wanted to go back to, which is investing in this case. So what would you say are the complexities to climate resilience investing, and how can stakeholders, governments, businesses be supported to navigate them for the maximum benefit of, first of all, the people, and then ultimately the planet?
Yeah, listen, the complexity is real. I mean, one of the things that, so I've spent a lot of time working with mining companies, for example, across a number of countries. South Africa is my adopted country. I've lived there for 26 years. And I'm thinking about the massacre that happened with lawman, Platinum, is now Sibanye. And again, people died, right? And so you had a complex community, you have a big mining company, which is also complex. So the complexity is real. And so we still have to be high touch. That's why what's in your own heads and hearts matter. Human beings matter, right? And so we've got to have the capacity to link with the right people within these big, complex organizations. And if you can get the leaders at the top to have sync between their heads and their hearts, then they will open the door to say, well, you need to speak to the CTO. No, you need to speak to the CRO. Well, why don't we get the CTO and the CRO and the head of sustainability and whoever else in the room, and let's work this out so that we can get alignment about the things we want to measure and with respect to climate, and then use those bridges. And so the complexity is real. The same applies with community. It's not just about throwing capital at these challenges. Throwing capital at capital alone at some of these vulnerable communities, it's like giving a person who's been starving a feast. If I'm starving and dying of thirst, what can I do with a feast? I can't digest it. And so we've got to look at both demand and supply side factors. We've got to be looking at, what can we provide, but then how do you flip the script, and then with empathy and compassion and intelligence, go this way and come up and say, okay, I'm going to listen to the proximate leaders in those communities, and I'm not going to fly in from DC thinking I got all the answers, and I'm going to listen to the people. Because quite often the people who are closest to the challenge have insights into how you can actually solve it.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Thank you, Dr. McPherson. Unfortunately, our time is coming to an end. Once again, it was a real pleasure talking to you, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of the entire audience when I say that we have gained some truly valuable insights today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's really my pleasure. Shukran.
So In conclusion, we have seen how technology combined with human connection and empathy can play a powerful role in bridging this gap between industries and communities. As we look ahead to COP28, this important message aligns with the UAE's values of nurturing inclusive growth as we work collaboratively and tirelessly to overcome urgent sustainability challenges. وفي الختام أتقدم لسموكم بجزيل الشكر على تشريفنا بحضوركم الكريم، ونشكر الدكتورة ماكفيرسون لمشاركتها لنا بخبراتها وطرحها البناء لآرائها، وكذلك المتحدثين والحضور الكريم. وفي الختام أود أن أدعو الفريق سمو الشيخ سيف بن زايد آل نهيان والمشاركين في فقرة الفيديو للصعود على المنصة لأخذ الصورة الجماعية. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. شكراً.